A very good morning, students. So today we will continue with module 1. As you all are aware that we are in the final module now, that is module 1, and in the previous week we had started with the energy, types of energy, and we are going on with that. So today we will start with some of the non-conventional energy sources. Okay, the conventional energy sources like petroleum products and other things we had finished. So today we will start with some of the non-conventional energy sources like solar energy, wind energy, hydraulic energy, nuclear energy, so on. Okay, so we'll first begin the session with solar energy. All right, solar power. So solar power means solar radiation, right? We receive energy from sun through radiation. So energy emitted by the sun will be in the form of heat as well as in the form of light. So in most of the cases we make use of the heat energy from the sun, all right, and convert that into some useful form of energy. Okay, so what do you mean by solar power? So power that is produced by utilizing the solar radiation. Okay, that is called as solar power. So we know the several applications of solar power, right? Nowadays we are trying to get the majority of the energy from solar, right, including electricity also, using a device called as solar cell. Okay, other than that, what are the other ways in which we can use or utilize the solar energy? One, to convert to use the amount of heat that is received and make it into some useful form. Okay, so next, before starting, we need to study some of the concepts here. One is called as solar constant. Now, what do you mean by solar constant? So the rate at which the solar energy is received in unit time on unit area at the top level of the Earth's atmosphere, that is called as solar constant. So solar constant means it is a value which is defined as the amount of radiation or the amount of solar energy that can be received per unit time. It can be per second or per minute, okay, per unit time on a unit area at the top level of the Earth's surface or Earth's atmosphere. That is defined as solar constant. That means, for example, okay, if I consider 1 meter square of area, okay, one area, on that particular area per second, how much amount of solar energy will be falling on that? The value of that energy is called as solar constant. Okay, so value of solar constant, as I told you, it's a energy received per unit time per unit area. Okay, so and usually on the surface of the Earth. So on that particular if I'm just taking an example, if 1 meter square area if I'm considering, and on that area how much energy is being transmitted per second, that is called a solar constant. They may ask this question as a definition, so you should write this particular definition and explain. Okay. Next, solar thermal energy harvesting. As I told you, solar, we are using the thermal energy that is received and making it into some useful applications. So based on that, we have thermal energy harvesting methods. So it refers to the process by which the heat energy radiated from the sun is captured, it is stored and utilized for various applications. Okay, so it refers to the process by which the heat energy which is radiated from the sun is being captured, it is stored, and then the same heat energy is being utilized for various applications. So some of the application that we are going to study is a flat plate collector, liquid flat plate collector, solar pond, and also solar photovoltaic cell, which I initially which I have referred to as solar cell. Okay, which is called as photovoltaic cell. So name itself is clear. Photo means light, voltaic means converting into voltage. So it's a device which converts the available energy of the sun into voltage. That's called as photovoltaic cell. So first we will go for liquid flat plate collector. Now what do you mean by this flat plate collector? Okay, so this is a device which is generally used for transferring heat to water. In other words, we can, in very simple terms, if I want to tell you, we can just consider this as a solar water heater. Okay, so what are the things that is available or is a part of these flat plate collectors? So in this particular case, if you can see, there is a transparent glass cover on the top. Okay, under that you have something called as an absorber plate, which is generally black in color. Okay, this is absorber plate, which will be usually black in color. This will be transparent. Generally it's a glass. Okay, so it will have a glass layer which will be transparent, and below that there will be a absorber plate, and below that you have water tubes. Okay, so these are water tubes, glass tubes generally. Okay, and then under that you have the insulation. This is completely insulated so that the heat should not go outside. Okay, so it's an airtight enclosure here, as you can see, and then you allow this solar radiation to fall onto this one in order to convert this, transfer this energy into water. So that is a major function of that. So so what generally happens in this case is that the energy which is received from the sun, usually heat energy, will be transferred into the water tubes. Thereby from the water tubes it will be transferred into the water, and water gets heated up. And this is how the solar heater basically works. The water will be initially cool, so from there the water will be heated up, and the heated water will be stored in the tank, and then that will be flowing into through the tap. Okay, now how this solar flat plate collector works. Okay, so the transparent glass cover is placed so that it allows the solar radiations of shorter wavelengths generally to enter and to reflect the longer wavelengths. Okay, so we need the shorter wavelengths which is coming from the solar radiation. The transparent glass allows it to flow through that, and then after that, once it is allowed, it will not allow it to go back. It forms as a trap there. So you can see in the sketch here, right? So it allows the radiation to come in, but then it will be made to reflect back, re-reflected wave, what is being shown here. So that means it allows all the radiation, shorter wave radiation, to enter into the enter through the glass, and then there is a absorber plate which is usually coated, as I told you, which is usually coated with the certain material, usually black in color. And why it is coated in black? Because you should know that black will have maximum absorptivity. Okay, so we cannot use generally if you use any other color, then the efficiency will be less. So more if you generally coated any object with black in color, then what will happen? It will have more absorbing capacity. That means whatever the solar radiation is falling on that, maximum heat will be absorbed by those the material which is black. All right. So that is the reason why most of the solar collectors are being painted black. If you could remember and see, there will be a glass top usually on the surface, and after that if you see, it will be usually blackish. That is a material absorber plate, what we call in technical terms. It will be black in color. Okay, the reason for that is the whole of the material, whatever is there, should absorb maximum amount of heat energy, right? So if it doesn't take more of heat energy, then the efficiency will be less. You know that there are so many criteria in case of solar radiation. It depends on so many factors, like it depends on the season, it depends on the weather conditions. Okay, it depends on whether it is day or night. So whatever availability is there, the solar radiation keeps varying. It depends on what time of the day it is. So intensity of solar radiation will vary. So it is always, we have to try to get the maximum amount of energy from the sun and then convert that into heat. Okay, so you know that it's not going to be always uniform. It will be varying. So whatever is available, we have to get the best of it. Okay, so that is why we have this absorber plate. So absorber plate will absorb all the heat, and that heat is transferred into the water tubes. Okay, and why do we have this insulation chamber onto that? Because we don't want that heat to again escape out into the atmosphere. The heat has to be trapped there, so that maximum amount of heat, whatever is there, being transferred into the water. Okay, majority of the case it is always water only, but there will be some other applications also where it can be used for other applications like drying of food grains or seasoning of wood, etc. Right, but majority of the application what we are seeing here is basically for heating of water. Okay, so after this water has been heated up, the heat water will start to flow into the one portion of the chamber, which I'll explain it in the later stage. Again the cold water will come in and circulate. So you may have that question in your mind, like what happens to the water. What we are seeing is actually one view, the side view of that. These tubes, whatever I am talking about here, they will have the length like this throughout. So water will be filled. It will have an inlet as well as it will have an outlet. So from the inlet you have cold water, that is cold in the sense warm water, which will be circulating. So after that water is being heated up, the energy whatever is received from the solar has been transferred into the water tubes, and these gets heated up generally to very high temperature. They will flow from there, and again the warm water, which is cooler generally compared to this water, will again flow into the water tubes. So it's a complete circulation that is being taking place. So this phenomenon can be explained here, whatever I am saying, the solar water heater. So you can see there will be a water tank. From the water tank you have the cold water which will be flowing into the water tubes. So this particular portion whatever we were talking was the previous sketch, the transparent cover, the water tubes over here, okay, and the absorber plate and the insulation whatever is being we were talking about in the previous sketch is this part. Okay, now how the water is being circulated. So you have the overhead tank here, which is generally warm water, or cold in the sense we generally refer to that as warm water. So it will come here and then it will enter into the water tubes. So these water tubes will have the water, and then because of the solar radiation and the effective heat transfer that is taking place in through water tubes, the water gets heated up, and because of the density difference, okay, hot water will generally try to flow upwards like this and enter into the tank. Okay, and it will enter into the tank. Meanwhile, when this hot water enters here and gets collected here, the cold water will again come back and gets recirculated here. Again this water will started getting heated up, and then this water will flow. Similarly, there will be a complete circulation that is taking place. Got it? Tank, this over a tank will have water that will fill here. So that will enter through this point into the water tubes in various tubes. It's get heated up due to this solar energy, and then that hot water will be again passed here. So usually the hot water will be collected on the top. The cold water which is at the bottom will again move downwards. Okay, that is the principle how water circulates. So cold water from the tank will come here, hot water will go and collect on the top. Now this hotter water can be taken from the outlet for other purposes, generally for either for cooking or for hot water for other applications. Okay, so that is how it works. So next one is photovoltaic cell or solar cell. So as I told you earlier, photovoltaic cell or solar cell is a device which converts solar energy into electricity, that is converting solar energy into voltage. So how is this happening? So what the solar cell will contain? So solar cell generally contains a semiconducting material. It will have N side on the top and then p side on the bottom. It's a junction of n-type silicon and a p-type silicon. Generally silicon or any other semiconductor, can be germanium also. Okay, so now what happens in the case of semiconductors, you know. So whenever there is a p-type semiconductor and an n-type semiconductor, they always want to go from one point to another point. But as the name says, it's a semiconductor. So it will need some energy for the electrons to move from one point to another point, right? So once we provide that energy for the electrons to jump from n side to p side, okay, then they will be able to produce voltage, that is flow of current will take place, right? Now how we are going to provide this particular energy? This energy is received from solar energy here. This is how a photovoltaic cell works. It's basically an n-type and p-type semiconductor that will be placed one below the other, okay? So at the normal stage it is not possible for it to conduct electricity, so it needs an excitation energy. The energy has to be supplied to the electron so that it gets enough energy to jump from the n side to p side, which is nothing but current, isn't it? If electrons can move from one point to another point, then that is what you mean by current. Flow of electrons is current. Okay, so to give that energy we need to supply energy, and that energy is supplied by solar radiation. That is how the principle of solar cell. Okay. Okay, so next one is solar pond. Now what do you mean by this solar pond? Okay, and how it is used? This is also a process in which we are utilizing the solar energy, okay, again in the form of heat only, and we use this for producing power, producing electricity. Okay, now first of all, before explaining what is solar pond, you should know what is the general process that is happening in a normal pond. Okay, solar pond is something that is being made, that is artificially created in order to trap the solar energy. Okay, but otherwise we need to generally know what is the phenomenon that is happening in the pond. So if you generally see in a river or a pond, you would see that even though the pond is being continuously subjected to solar radiation, that is solar energy, you would see that the pond will not get heated up. I don't know whether you people have you observed these phenomenons or not. Generally, if you go to and see if any river or a pond, even though if it's, let's say it's a summer season, its sun is directly on the top of that pond, and there's a lot of energy, that solar energy is falling on that, you would generally see that the water of the pond will not be heated. It will be still cold in the sense it will be cool in the normal temperature, right? So why this is happening? Why is that? Because the solar energy which is falling on the pond is not able to heat that particular pond. It's because the pond, usually whatever the water gets heated up, they rise up. Okay, when the solar radiation falls on the water, on the river or the pond, it will start going deeper, and then the bottom layer usually will get heated up. And then when they get heated up, they, because of the lesser density, they will try to come to the top, and they will even if it is converting into vapor, they will escape into the atmosphere. Okay, there will be a normal circulation that is taking place. Water circulation will be taking place in the pond. So solar energy will fall on that. It will heat the water, and which is at the bottommost level usually, and then that will flow up because of the lesser density. Hot water will have lesser density compared to that of cold water, so they will try to move up to the surface, and then from there they become vapor and they escape into the atmosphere. Thereby the water at the top will remain cool only, right? So again and again this process will be happening. The water usually gets circulated to the top and they become vapor and they escape into the atmosphere. So the water will generally, you don't feel that water is being heated. Now in a solar pond, what is being tried to done is that if we are able to trap that energy which is usually happening at the bottom of the pond, and if we don't allow that water to come up, and become vapors and escape into the atmosphere, if we can trap that energy at the bottom itself, we can use that heat energy for some other source. That is what is being done in the case of solar pond. So as you can see here, in the case of solar pond, there are 3 layers that is being made in the pond. Okay, it's artificially made. We are not talking about actual pond. It's created such a way that water will be stored into that, and we are using solar energy to heat the water. So what will happen here is you have a top level, that is called as the surface zone, where we have the fresh water. There is no salinity or any kind of salt content in that. It is usually fresh water on the top, and then what we do is we increase the content, salt content in that, and we have another layer in the second. As you can see, this layer I'm talking about, which is called as the intermediate layer or the gradient zone, in which the salt content is more with respect to the top surface. So when you add salt to that, the density will increase and it will settle down. Okay, so the topmost layer what you have is called the surface zone, or it is the fresh water. Below that we have another zone which is called as the intermediate zone or the gradient zone, where the salt water content is increasing. And then we have the third zone on the bottom, okay, this one, which is called as the storage zone or the saturated salt water. So the salt water content is even more in that case. So 3 run. One in the top surface we don't have any salt content. Below that we have in gradient zone or intermediate zone, and on the bottommost layer we have something called as the storage zone. So these are intentionally created by having variable salinity in that, variable salt contents in that, so that first layer will be on the top itself, the second layer will always be on the bottom, in the middle, and the third layer, which is of more salt content, will be in the bottommost position. Okay, so what will happen now? If you see, when you have the increased in the density is more, whatever is in the bottom, the solar radiation will reach the bottommost point. The solar radiation will start reaching here. Okay, the water will allow this solar energy to flow through, and it will reach here, and the layer which is on the bottom, the storage layer, storage zone, what we call, they start getting heated up, and it will be continuously heated and heated. And because their density it's having more density, they are not able to rise. Okay, because of the salinity gradient, or more salt content is present in that, it is not possible for the storage zone, where the heat is being received and they become continuously hot, but the density will be more, so they are not able to rise to the top, because there is a salinity gradient, the lesser gradient there, and top of that there is no gradient at all. So it is not possible for this gradient, this particular zone where it is having more density, to rise to the top. Thereby the heat whatever is being received from the solar energy gets entrapped there, and it will be there only. The top layer will be as it is, the intermediate layer will be as it cannot cross that intermediate layer and come up. It will be getting trapped. So whatever heat energy that is received from the sun, that heat energy gets totally entrapped into the bottom layer itself, and they start getting heated up. So what will we do is we take that heat energy out. So for example, you can see here the cold water inlet is over here, okay, and this gets heated up continuously, and it is not able to rise to the top. In normally what happens in pond, this will get heated up, and because they are getting heated and their density goes on reducing, they will go to the top, they will escape into the atmosphere. But we are creating a salinity gradients here, so that this water, whatever the heat energy that is received, will not be able to go to the top, and they get trapped here itself. So that heat energy will be taken out from the other side, and this is usually used for running turbines. Okay, turbines or any other sources, but this can be used as a hot water, or usually even if vapors can also be taken out from there, and that can be used for other applications. So we are using another form of solar heat energy only here. So we are using the solar energy, trapping the heat from that, and that heat energy can be used for various applications. So that is how solar pond works. Okay, next one is wind power or wind energy. So wind, we have to first of all know what do you mean by wind, right? There are two different terms here. One is called wind and other one is called as air. So what is basically a difference between these two words? What do you mean by air and what do you mean by wind? Okay, so do you know this? So air means, you know what it is, a mixture of various gases which is present in the earth atmosphere, that is air. So if it is stagnant at a point, we call that as air. If the air starts moving, then we call that as wind. Okay, that is the difference between air and wind. So the air, when it starts moving, then that is called as wind. That's the difference. Wind is, in other words, if I want to define wind is nothing but movement of the air. And why the movement of the air takes place? You would generally see, right? So there will be different speeds at which you have wind. In some areas there will be no movement of the air at all. There will be no wind at all. But in some areas, if you see, there will be very fast movement of the air, right? So it varies from region to region again. But what is the primary cause for the movement of the air, or why wind is being created? Because of temperature difference. Okay, it's because it's an indirect form of solar energy only. Wind is also an indirect form of solar energy. Because of the solar energy, because of the variation in the densities or temperatures between the air, the movement takes place. Just like how I explained in the case of water, as I told you, when the water gets denser, lighter, it moves upwards, isn't it? The denser part will go down, the lighter part will go upwards, depending on the density. The same thing will happen with the air also. So when the air is receiving heat energy, the air which is becoming lighter, it will try to come up, as well as whichever is denser will go to bottom. So this movement, what is happening with respect to air, causes wind. Okay, so this is a indirect source of solar energy, wind. So because of this wind, again I told you it depends on various factors. If you see, wind will have different speeds at different areas. If you go to the higher altitudes, wind speed will be more. If you go to the lower sea level, you usually don't have so much of speed. But again, it varies from region to region depending upon the various characters. Okay, so anyways, what we are learning here is how to utilize this wind and convert it into some form of energy, and basically electrical energy. So direct conversion takes place here. From wind, if you are able to convert this movement of the air into mechanical rotation or mechanical motion, we can produce power, isn't it? So this is what we generally do in any of the case, for that matter. Even in the case of turbines, or in the case of hydraulic turbines, or gas turbines, or steam turbines, what we try to do is, we take some form of energy and then convert that into rotation. That is our ultimate aim. So if we are able to rotate it, then we can directly couple it with the generator and we can produce electricity, right? Same thing we do in the case of hydraulic energy, same thing we do in the case of steam turbine. So hydraulic energy, we use the flow of water to run the turbine blades. That turbine, when it starts rotating, is coupled with the generator and power is produced. Same thing we do in the case of steam turbines also. We do a lot of work there. We usually take coal as our primary source of energy. We use that energy of the coal, burn that coal, use the heat energy into increase the temperature of the water, convert that into steam. That steam, when it is still supplied energy, it will get the higher speed, and that steam will make the turbines to rotate, and then the turbine will be coupled with generator to get electricity, isn't it? So basically we are using the energy of the coal, converting that into heat. That heat energy is again utilized for heating the water, and from water we are producing steam, and that steam is used to run the turbine. So that's how energy conversion takes place. Same way in the case of hydraulic energy also, same thing. The water will be there, which will be at a greater height. We are allowing the kinetic energy of the water to be converted into pressure energy in the blades, and then we are converting that movement of the blades and coupling it with the generator to produce electricity. So a similar thing is also happening in the case of wind. So we call that as wind turbine. So we are using the wind energy to rotate a turbine, that is called as wind turbine. Okay, so as you can see the sketch here, so these are the blades of the wind turbine. And wind turbine also, I'm pretty sure you would have seen these wind turbines. Of course we don't find much of a wind turbine in our region, in Mangalore region, but if you have not seen it directly also, you would have seen this in either in the movies or in some TV, anywhere. You would know that there's a huge tower with the huge blades, white in color usually. Very huge blades will be there, 3 blades which will be rotating, right, which are nothing but wind turbines. We call it as windmills. Okay, so you can see here, this is the wind, that's a tower, and on top of that you will have blades. Generally we have 3 blades in that. Okay, and the design of the blades is a very complicated job. Actually we are not going to study about the blades. What about what is the shape of the blade, why it is being designed in such a way? Okay, there's a lot of things to be studied with respect to the design of the blade itself. Okay, so but we are only studying there are blades here, and then when the wind strike the blades, it has to be in such a position that it has to utilize the energy that is coming from the wind and make the blades to rotate. Okay, so the blade, if you simply keep a blade with any structure, it may not be efficient. So the design has to be very important. Based on that, when whatever direction the wind flows, it should be able to convert that energy into rotation. So the blades will rotate. So when the blade rotates, what will happen? You have to see here, this blades which will be coupled to a shaft. Okay, you can see it is, yes, that is written here, that is shaft. From the shaft it is coupled to a gearbox. GB is written, which is nothing but a gearbox. Now why gearbox is required here? So that we can vary the speed. If you generally see the movement of the blades, the windmill's blade, which is very huge actually, it will be very, very slow. The rotation of that will be slow. So that speed is not enough for running a turbine or a generator, right? So you need to have a gearbox so that you can vary the speed. You need different speed ratios. So if you have a gearbox, then we can convert that speed into certain higher speed depending upon the size of the gears that we are going to use in the gearbox. So that from the gearbox we have a coupling which is coupled with the generator. Okay, so as the wind will flow through the blades will rotate. So when the blade rotates, the shaft connected to the blade will also rotate. Now that shaft is connected to a gearbox where the speed variation takes place, right? And the output of the gearbox will be connected to the generator via coupling. This is how the power is being produced. But in wind energy there will be different speeds usually. So the power production will also vary depending upon the speed. The speed will not be always uniform. The speed can vary from time to time. Okay, sometimes it will be more speed, sometimes the speed may vary. So depending upon the speed, the power production also will vary. So next one is hydropower. So this we have already studied actually. We have studied about hydraulic turbines. So how hydraulic turbine is used, which are the different types of turbine, different flows based on different speeds as well as different head axial flow, radial flow turbines, right? Kaplan turbine, Francis turbine, Pelton wheel. So these are actually used here. Okay, so what we call it as a powerhouse. So this overall concept we are just going to see what do you mean by hydropower. So because we are studying different types of energy sources here, so we have studied different types of non-conventional energy sources like solar energy, then in that different types, then we have wind energy, and also we have to study about hydraulic energy. So what actually happens in the case of hydraulic energy is we are using the energy of the water to convert that into mechanical energy and thereby converting that into electrical energy, right? So this is also one form of non-conventional energy sources. So this, most of the things, you have a dam where water is being stored at a greater height, which is called as a reservoir. From that particular reservoir, we will have a pipe which is connecting a length which is usually very long and which is connecting to the turbine, what we call it as penstock. Okay, that's called as penstock. So we are allowing the water to flow from a greater height. So whatever potential energy of the water was there in the reservoir will be converted into kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy is being utilized by the turbine. So we have a turbine that is being placed here. So water will come at a very high speed and it will strike the turbine blades and it will make the turbine blades to rotate. So turbine, when it rotates, it is the shaft which is connected to these turbines will also rotate at greater speed, and the shaft is again coupled with a generator. So from there the power will start producing power, and that power will be transmitted through the transmission lines and then into the grids, and from there it reaches the various outputs. It can be domestic application or industrial application. So we produce a lot of energy through hydraulic energy, but again there is also a problem with that. We cannot have the water throughout the year. So we can only have water up to some point of time, and usually in summer we don't have available hydraulic energy. So again we will have to go back to the steam energy only, steam turbines. Okay, so as long as we have water, there's a rainy season, the water gets filled in the reservoir, we can use this hydraulic energy and we can run. But again, it's seasonal, as I told you. Solar energy has also certain limitations. Wind energy has its own limitations. Now hydraulic energy also has its own limitations, right? It cannot be used throughout the year. So it can be operational only during some part of the year, only during the rainy season and up to certain point. And after that, once there is no rainfall, the water level will be less, so we cannot utilize or use this energy or run the turbines to produce power. Okay, so that is all about hydraulic energy or hydropower. Okay, so next one is nuclear energy. So nuclear energy means the energy that is possessed in the nucleus, right? So you know that the most common isotope of uranium that is used for producing nuclear energy, it will have tremendous amount of energy in that. Again, we are converting the energy that available in these atoms into heat energy, because it produces a tremendous amount of heat, and that heat is again used to convert the water into steam, and then it works as a steam turbine only. So ultimately we are using it as a steam turbine. So in steam turbines particularly, we use coal as the source. In nuclear energy, we are using this nucleus for producing that heat, and after that it is usually converted into steam, and from the steam we are using to produce electricity. Okay, so it is the power that is generated utilizing the energy in the nucleus of a atom, right? So we are basically using, there are two types of reactions. I'm sure all of you would know that. One is called as nuclear fusion, and another one is called as nuclear fission. Nuclear fusion means combining of two atoms and making a larger atom. Nuclear fission means a large heavy atom will be broken into two different lighter atoms, thereby releasing tremendous amount of energy. Okay, so how it is usually done? When you are striking the core with the atom with a neutron, so it gets split into two different atoms, thereby releasing a lot of energy, and we are using that energy to convert into electricity. Okay, so as you can see in the sketch here, you have an uranium iso 235 isotope. So it will be bombarded with a neutron, so that heavy atom will be splitting up into two different element, and also giving two more neutrons plus energy. So it's very important to control this nuclear fission and fusion reaction. If you are not able to control this becomes a disaster, because it will just go on multiplying, because this neutrons whatever is produced will go and strike another atom, that will again split, and then another neutrons will come, and we literally cannot stop it after that, right? And that is why we have very much limited amount of energy, application of this. We cannot use it wherever we want it. The nuclear plant has to be set up at a very different, outer areas, where because of any of the accidents that may take place, it becomes very difficult. Okay, so the application of this is also, I would say, you cannot just use it as you want. There will be a limited application of nuclear power plants also. Okay, so this thing I've already explained. So you have a neutron. The neutron will strike a target nucleus, which is, as example I have told you, uranium 235 isotope. So when that strikes, it will be fission, in the sense it will break up into two more nucleus, and some neutrons will also be released, and this neutron will again strike the next one, and from there it goes on, the chain goes on. That's why we call that as nuclear chain reaction. So it is not that one will stop, one will done and it will stop. It will be chain reaction that is going to happen from one point to another point. Okay, so now how are we going to use this nuclear energy? Whatever I have spoken till now is about the nuclear fission reaction that was taking place. Now how are we going to use that nuclear fission reaction, or the energy that is formed, into electricity to our purpose? So that is done in something called as a nuclear power plant. Okay, so what usually happens in the case of nuclear power plant? So if we could observe this particular sketch properly, if I neglect this part here, it is actually steam. Okay, so steam is being generated. That steam is made to use to run the turbine. Turbine is coupled with the generator. From there power is produced, and the power is passing through the transmission lines, and then it will be reaching the house or industry, let's say. So basically this is nothing but we are forming a steam power plant only here, isn't it? But how do we produce the steam? We are not using coal or boilers to produce the steam, and then we are using that to run the steam turbine, but we are using the nuclear energy here. Alright, so we are using the nuclear energy, and using this nuclear energy we are converting this water what is available into steam, and that steam is made to run the turbine. Okay, so what basically happens is, here you have the nuclear reactor. Okay, this is called as a nuclear reactor, inside which you have the control rods. So nuclear fission reactions will be taking place here. Okay, so reactor will be an enclosed chamber. It should not allow the radiation to come out of that. So it's usually lead that is being used, so that lead will not allow the radiation to come out. Any other material, if you use it, the radiation will come out of that. You cannot stop the radiation with normal metals. So you need lead has a specific property of not allowing the radiation to come out. Okay, so you have a nuclear reactor here. Inside the nuclear reactor you have the control rods. We have the uranium isotope which will be bombarded with the neutron, and then they will the fission reactions takes place. Meanwhile, there will be tremendous amount of heat energy also will be released. So that heat energy will be made to pass through the steam generator. So this particular point is called as a steam generator, where the water will be filled, and because of the heat that is coming out of the fission reaction, that heat will be used to heat the water, and the water will be converted into steam. Okay, so whatever the steam that is being produced, the steam will be made to pass through run the turbine, and the turbine will be running because of the power coming from the steam. Turbine will be coupled to the generator. So steam, whatever is being used to run the turbine, and it is coupled to the generator, will produce the power, and that power will be transmitted outside. Okay, so there is a cooling tower here. So whatever the steam that is running the turbine, which will have high pressure, will lose all its energy, and when it comes down, the steam with the low pressure will be condensed here using a cooling tower, and that steam will be again condensed back into water, and that water is again pumped back into the steam generator. So the water will be recirculating here all the time. So water will be converted to steam, runs the turbine, it loses all the energy, it will be condensed and it becomes water, and the same water is being recirculated back into the steam generator. Again it becomes steam, again runs the turbine, again gets condensed, and this cycle will be continuing. In the meanwhile, the same case in the nuclear reactor, there will be continuous reaction that is taking place. Heat will be constantly produced throughout inside the nuclear reactor. That heat will be passed through the steam generator. So steam heat will be continuously supplied, water will also be supplied, steam forms, gives up its energy for the turbine, it condenses down and it goes on. The cooling tower is used to cool or condense the steam, and then it gives away the heat into the atmosphere. So this is how basically a nuclear power plant works. Okay, so we have studied a lot of things here. We started with the solar radiation today. So in solar radiation we had to study 3 things. First one was solar flat plate collector. After that we had to study about solar photovoltaic cell, and then we had to study about solar pond. The 3 things we have studied in the case of solar energy. And after solar energy, the next one was wind energy. As I've told you, wind is also a form of solar energy. So how wind is, we are using the energy of the wind to run the wind turbine, and from the turbine we are running it, coupling it with the generator and producing power. And then after that we also studied about hydraulic energy or hydropower, where the energy of the water will be used to run the turbine again, and from that again it's connected to the generator and electricity is being produced. And now last one what we have studied just now is nuclear power plant, where we are using the energy of the fission reaction that is taking place, and the energy that is produced in the nuclear reaction will be used to run the turbine and producing power. Okay, so I will stop here at this point, and in the next video we will continue with this other part of energy. That is, we have studied the different types of energy sources right now, and we have one more part that is left in this concept only, that is regarding the ozone depletion as well as all the environmental effects of these things. So that we'll be doing it in the next video.